Hi everyone. In our last video lecture, we started talking about how offspring inherit their traits from the parents, and the sperm and the egg, because of meiosis, only carry one copy for every gene, But in our body cells, we have two copies because the egg and the sperm will fuse and the two copies will reunite because they're on homologous chromosomes and they come back together. In this video lecture, we are going to explain how to use a tool called a Punnett square that helps us predict the probability of offspring of children, because we're focusing on human genetics here, of children having certain traits if we know what their parents are, or if we predict what their parents are. So we were working last time with the trait of freckles and non-freckles, and this one was interesting because although fewer people have freckles, right, if you look around you, fewer people have freckles, but it's actually a dominant trait. This is an example of something that's less common but is dominant, and no freckles is recessive. So now let's talk about how to use a Punnett square. What if we had parents that were both heterozygous? They both have big F, little f. So what is their phenotype? Remember, big F stands for freckles, little f, no freckles. So both parents have freckles and they're heterozygous. And what if we wanted to predict, if these two adults had a child, would that child have freckles or no freckles? So a Punnett square allows us to kind of calculate probability of what potential offspring would look like. All right, so the way we use this Punnett square is that we pick one of the outer sides for each parent. And what I mean by outer sides is outside of the square, so one side. So this is one side on top, and this is one side here. And so let's just say that the mother's eggs will go here. And so the mother, this is a symbol for woman, is big F, little f. But her gametes, her egg, will only have one of the genes, not both. So the egg could either have an F, big F, or the egg could have a little f based on her genotype. The other side will represent the father's sperm. So here's the symbol for the male. The sperm could either have one big F, right? It could carry that sperm could have the chromosome with the gene for freckles, or because of independent assortment and meiosis, the sperm could have the gene on the chromosome for no freckles. All right, so after you have that, you start filling in the inside. So the inside represents the offspring. So if, for example, this sperm fertilized this mother's egg, what would the offspring look like? So if this sperm with the big F fertilized this egg with the big F, well, obviously the child would have big F, big F. Now, if this sperm fertilized this egg, the child would have big F, little f. Now we go to the bottom. If this sperm fertilized this egg, the child would be heterozygous as well, big F, little f. Now, if this sperm fertilized this egg, it would be little f, little f. And then you have to write this as probability. So out of 4 children, right? Out of 4 children, our genotypic ratio would be 1, big F, to 2, 1, 2, big F, little f, to 1, little f, little f. That would be our genotypic ratio. How about our phenotypic ratio? Remember, phenotype is how they look physically. How many would have freckles? Well, this offspring would have freckles, this offspring would have freckles, and this offspring would have freckles. So 3 with freckles, and then this one here would have no freckles. So it'd be 3 to 1. 3 freckles to 1. If you like percentages better, you could think of this as 75% chance child would have freckles, 25% that they would not, because each of these boxes a quarter, 25%. All right, I hope that made sense. Now let's move on to another problem. Once we understand how meiosis works and how certain genes are passed down, it helps us also predict the chance of disease occurring, because we know certain genes, right? In medicine, we can identify certain genes that cause disease, and we know, if we know what the genotype of the mother is and of the father is, we can say, well, what's the likelihood that the child would have this disease? So an example of someone you may have heard of before, Angelina Jolie. She actually was heterozygous, or is heterozygous, for a gene that, if it's mutated, gives you a higher incidence of having breast cancer. If it has a mutation, you have it's a recessive gene. So if you have 2 of those mutated genes, you have breast cancer. If you're heterozygous, you don't, but it still increases your chance eventually over your life of getting it. So Angelina Jolie is heterozygous for a mutated breast cancer gene, but she does not have breast cancer. Okay, so that tells you that this trait for breast cancer is recessive, because even though she has the gene, she doesn't have the disease. Her ex-husband, Brad Pitt, is homozygous for the normal breast cancer gene, so he does not have this mutated copy. What is the probability that their daughter, right, they have a daughter, will be homozygous for the mutated breast cancer gene, heterozygous, or have 2 normal breast cancer genes? So this one sounds a little more complicated, but it's actually done the same way and basically pretty simple. And so actually people in this situation, often even before they have kids, want to know, if they have a child, if they know that this disease gene is in their DNA, if I have a child, will my child have that? And that sometimes is the deciding factor of, should I adopt, should I have my own children? So how we would do this is first choose a letter for the trait and indicate lower and uppercase. So what I mean by that is, we're talking about one trait, this breast cancer gene, and it can come in 2 forms, 2 alleles. One that's mutated and causes breast cancer, and the other one that's normal, right? And so if you read again, you say that Angelina Jolie is heterozygous for the mutated breast cancer gene, but she does not have it. So right there, it tells you which one's dominant and which one's recessive. So I chose B because we're talking about breast cancer. So the normal breast cancer gene is capital, okay? And that one is dominant. We know this because she also has the mutated breast cancer gene, but she doesn't have breast cancer. So that must mean that that one's recessive. All right. So Angelina Jolie's genotype, she's heterozygous, so she's big B, little b. It said that Brad Pitt is homozygous for the normal breast cancer gene. So he's big B, big B, sorry. So the second step, which I already told you, is to write the genotype for each parent, and then the cross. So if these are the parents, the cross would be Angelina's genotype times Brad Pitt's genotype. Okay. Sometimes when we talk about diseases in humans, we call people that carry this gene for the disease, like Angelina Jolie has this breast cancer gene in her DNA, but she doesn't actually have the breast cancer. We refer to these people as carriers. All right, so it's another way of saying heterozygous, and for a disease that is recessive. So we could say Angelina's heterozygous. We could say she's a carrier for the breast cancer gene. Now that we know Angelina and Brad's genotypes, we're going to use a Punnett square to figure out the likelihood that their children are carriers, have breast cancer, or don't. So this was Angelina's genotype right here, big B, little b. Brad's was big B, big B. So now let's use the Punnett square. Remember, you have to pick one side for the female gametes, the eggs, one side for the male, the sperm. So let's just be consistent with how we did it last time. So the mom's eggs will be here. The dad's sperm will be here. So what would the moms put here? The mom, this is Angelina, big B, little b. Her egg could have a big B. Oh, I started with the guy. Sorry. Here's Brad. He could have a big B or a big B. That's the only possibility because he doesn't have any breast cancer gene. The mom could give a big B or a little b, Angelina. Now, fertilization. Here, big B, big B, big B, little b, big B, big B, big B, little b. All right, so here the genotypic ratio would be 1 to 1. I mean, technically 2 to 2, but 2 to 2 just reduces to 1 to 1, or 50% big B, 50% big B, little b. How about the phenotypic ratio? We have to be able to convert them to phenotypes. No children would have breast cancer. It would be impossible, right? So for a recessive trait, if one of the parents is homozygous dominant, even if the other parent carries it or has that recessive trait, you need 2 copies of that. So you would need both parents to pass down that recessive trait. So in this case, it would be impossible. All right, so I will end there for this lecture. Take care.